And we're back. So thank you for your patience as we restart the live streaming. Our schedule this evening is our next speaker. I'm going to introduce him in a moment. We've got several speakers from the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP. Then we will be having Ron Hampton, former Executive Director of the National Black Police Association. Then we'll have another song from Phyllis Prentice, and she will be followed by Suja Graham with Witness to Innocence. And following Suja will be our closer tonight, Mr. Bill Pelkey. So without further ado, I want to pop this up here and introduce a friend, a couple of friends actually. Linwood is going to introduce Hillary, but I want to say before he does that, because he probably doesn't know this, that Hillary was on the, I met Hillary, I think when you were on the board of directors of the National Coalition to Abolish the Death Penalty, and he's outlasted, I don't know how many executive directors or presidents or whatever the head guy is at the NAACP, but here you are, and we're so glad that you're able to come today. But before Hillary, we're going to hear from a friend of mine that I've gotten to know in the work that I've been doing over the past 4 or 5 years in Delaware with the Delaware Repeal Project. What's happened with the bill in Delaware is, sadly, last night at the end of the session, the bill died. But interestingly, earlier this year, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in the case known as Hearst, and took basically found unconstitutional the current scheme of sentencing people to death in Florida. And there are 2 other states that have a similar kind of structure, Alabama and Delaware, which the issue there is that they were not requiring a unanimous jury to sentence people to death. So in any case, the Delaware Supreme Court heard arguments about this and basically decided that they were going to postpone or suspend all death penalty activity, whether it was a case that was still pending for its first trial or a case that was getting ready to, for its last appeal before execution. All death penalty, everything, was postponed in Delaware earlier this spring. And the state Supreme Court there first took written arguments and amicus briefs, and then on June 15th, they heard oral arguments and were waiting for them to rule. And what happened then is when they decided to suspend all death penalty cases pending their decision as to whether Delaware's statute is constitutional, that's when a decision was made to suspend the campaign to push the repeal bills, Senate Bill 40 in Delaware. And effectively, that's when the bill stopped moving forward. It was just before the legislature was coming back into session, and it just didn't make sense to try to legislate it when the Supreme Court was going to rule on it. So where the legislation is in Delaware now is that at the end of the session it dies. If the state Supreme Court rules the death penalty in Delaware unconstitutional, then beautiful. And if it doesn't, then we'll have to start the bill up again in January. In any case, Linwood Jackson has been a member of NAACP for a long time, but I got to know him as a radio and television host who was constantly calling me to bring him more guests, and that's what we did. So Linwood is here to talk about not only how he came to understand what was going on in Delaware and all the voices of experience that he hosted on his show, but also I wanted to have a special welcome for him because he was just elected and installed as the president of the Delaware branch of the NAACP. So please welcome Linwood Jackson.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate it. You got half that, you got it right, especially my part. Greetings, everyone. How's everybody? My name is Charles Linwood Jackson. I do host 2 shows, one television show called the the Urban Compass with Linwood Jackson, and on Comcast Channel 28. And I host a radio show on Faith 1510, the Linwood Jackson Radio Show. Both local shows in Delaware, in Wilmington, Delaware. But I tell you, I've never been live streamed. So this is a little exciting. I want to thank everybody out there and say hi to everybody out there in the social media. Isn't technology beautiful? It's a great way to get the message out. I also, as Abe said, I did just get elected to as president of NAACP, Delaware State Conference, and it is an honor that I didn't know was going to happen, but it did. I've been involved in NAACP. I'm a fully paid life member for 15 years, more serving 2 terms as state secretary. How many of you out there are NAACP? Let me raise your hand. Wow, that's what I'm talking about. And those of you who are not, obviously we invite you to join us because we certainly are heavily involved in this issue. A little bit about the NAACP. It was founded in 1909 by a diverse and multiracial group of activists, much like you sitting in front of me today. People came together to work on the issues of their time: education, healthcare, decent housing, police brutality, fair trials in courts, basic equal rights, and justice for all people. I'm reminded of all of that pain and hardship that they must have went through every time I watch the television show or television screen and read the newspapers, and I see someone else out there has been killed. It seems as though it's never ending. NAACP's success in drawing alliances, both black and white, representing a wide array of social service groups, continue to serve as the bridge to vital resources that's needed to meet our diverse needs. I started broadcasting every week on TV and radio in 2010. I had a choice. And what it was I wanted to talk about on those shows, so I decided to try and tackle some of the issues that we face in our society today. No doubt we do have a lot of issues to work on. The death penalty may be the biggest of them all, and probably the easiest to fix. All we have to do as a country is just stop it. Just stop the killing. Most all industrialized countries in the world have abolished the death penalty. We live in a civilized society, but it's almost like we're living in the Stone Age. Since I started broadcasting, I've had the pleasure of interviewing many people from all walks of life. I started interviewing death row exonerees, murder victim family members, death row family members, police officers, correctional officers, and noted activists, clergy, and scholars, such as many of you out there today. People like Abe, Bonowitz, if we can give him a round of applause, please, for doing the great work that he's done for a long time. And he's absolutely right. Ever since I met him, I've been bugging him to bring in more guests because this issue has to be heard. Sister Helen Young, people like Kristen Foley, Jack Sullivan Jr., Dr. Sandra Joy, Ron Hampton. A lot of you were out there, and Leno Valera, Barbara Lewis, Sabrina Porter, Sherry Dorsey Walker, many, many, many more. I can go on and on. I don't think we have time, and I don't have enough paper. But I did start to see with my own eyes Delaware's death penalty and execution process. And I turned that awareness into activism by engaging in more dialogue and trying to educate our community. I believe the facts are on our side, that people know what's going on, and they will be able to make an informed decision as regards to the death penalty, and will come to an end, and the death penalty will come to an end that much sooner. And I believe that that time is now. This is the moment. Now is the time. Numerous families and loved ones of murder victims support alternatives to the death penalty for many reasons, including the death penalty process is a traumatizing experience for families, often requiring them to relieve the pain and suffering of the death of their loved one for many, many, many years. Life without parole provides certain punishment without the endless reopening of those wounds. Hundreds of millions of dollars are spent on the death penalty each year. If we replace the death penalty with life without parole, millions of dollars can be spent on violence prevention efforts, solving unsolved murder cases, and increasing victim services. The time to abolish the death penalty is now. The death penalty places the focus on the legal consequences, not on human consequences. Attention is directed on the crime and the accused instead of where it belongs, on the family and the loved ones of the victim and on our community. Life without parole punishes the criminal without putting him or her in the headlines. We believe the death penalty is not and never will be a solution to violence in our society. The death penalty system is unfair in its implementation. It is racist, predisposed to executing the poor and destitute among us. It is more costly than life in imprisonment. Thus, it drains society's resources that could be used for the promotion of authentic justice and true healing. As we invest in vengeance in this society, we divest ourselves of compassion. As we support retribution, we neglect restorative justice. We cannot be a community of compassion and unity if we choose to destroy one another. And we should not allow the state to do it either. The death penalty does not deter crime and keep communities safer. It is unfairly applied to poor people, people of color, and the mentally ill. 42% of inmates currently on death row, and 34% of those executed since 1976 were African American, although African American people only make up 13% of the nation's population. And the similarities between historical lynching and the legal lynching, the state-sponsored executions. Well, according to an Equal Justice Initiative report, capital trials today remain proceedings with little racial diversity. The accused is often the only person of color in the courtroom, and legally racial discrimination in jury selection is widespread, especially in the South and in capital cases. In Houston County, Alabama, prosecutors have excluded 80% of qualified African Americans from juries in death penalty cases. More than 8 in 10 American lynchings between 1889 and 1918 occurred in the South, and more than 8 in 10 of the nearly 1,400 legal executions carried out in this country since 1976 have been in the South. Capital punishment is a direct descendant of lynching. The first hanging in Delaware was in 1662, the official method of execution, until 1986, when lethal injection became the new official method. The gallows, they weren't disassembled until 2003, not that long ago. Since 1976, the capital punishment was resumed in Delaware. 16 people were executed. Half the people executed, 8 were African American, and there was 1 Native American. Currently, Delaware has 18 people on death row. 14 of them are African American or Hispanic. The state of Delaware has more people of color on death row per capita than any other state in this nation, 75%. African Americans, only 21% of the Delaware population. The Delaware Supreme Court overturned the conviction of death row prisoner Jermaine Wright. After 21 years, Mr. Wright was the longest serving inmate on Delaware's death row. He was granted a retrial, and then he was let out of prison, citing a miscarriage of justice. After nearly 1 year of freedom, Mr. Wright was headed back to prison to be retried again. The Jermaine Wright case proves the Delaware death penalty system is just as flawed as any of the other states. This was a textbook case of wrongful conviction. No physical evidence false snitch testimony, a coerced confession that didn't even line up with the facts of the case, and prosecutional misconduct. The system is broken. We have to stop executing innocent people for crimes they did not commit. Historically, Delaware has not supported granting equality to people of color because we were a slave state. Delaware did not ratify the 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution abolishing slavery, the 14th Amendment establishing equal protection under the law, or the 15th Amendment allowing freedmen the right to vote. We have also not followed the example of 23 other states that have added equal rights or equal protection clauses to their constitutions. It's ironic that support for the apology for slavery was almost unanimous, yet 23 House members voted against the racially biased death penalty. So many are still blind to the racial injustice that pervades Delaware. The problem of racial discrimination in Delaware is not new. The findings of the Delaware Faith and Actions Committee on Racism and State Government are a sobering illustration of the need for equal protection clauses in the Delaware Constitution. The News Journal, the Delaware Human Relations Commission, and the United States Department of Justice have all reported on the challenged discriminatory practices in state agencies and the public education system. Now adding an equal protection clause to the Constitution of Delaware is not a magic bullet that will stop discriminatory practices tomorrow, but it is an additional layer of legal protection and a powerful moral commitment to the values of equality and fairness. It is past time that Delaware commit to the promise that all men and women are created equal and protect the groups of people that we as a society recognize suffer discrimination. This is especially important when it comes to racial discrimination, because discrimination based on race, we all know, still runs rampant today in our society. The work of the NAACP still matters and is as relevant today as it has ever been. We still need people to help fight against the injustices, not just for you and me and our families, but for our future president, future Supreme Court justices, future governors, principals, homeowners. This year is an election year. Never in American history have we needed to vote more than this year. The last election year in Delaware, we had the lowest voter turnout in 60 years, just 37% of registered Delaware residents voted in the last election. The lowest percentage since the state started keeping figures in 1956. We can't let that happen this year. We have to get out and vote for a person who has the best interests at heart, someone who is going to work on resolving our issues. Even though Delaware's small size and population, we execute our fellow citizens more frequently than California, the state with the largest death row in the country. Per capita, Delaware ranks number 5 among states that impose the death sentence and number 3 in executions. Based on the state's murder rate, Delaware ranks 3 in executions. Third, convicted accomplices to a murder can be sentenced to death in Delaware even if they have not actually killed anyone. Compared to all the other states with the death penalty, the Delaware statute governing the death penalty is the broadest. Virtually any murder can be tried as a capital case there. Jury decisions not to impose the death sentence can be overridden by the trial judge. There are currently 18 men on death row and an average of 14 to 18 capital cases in process at any given time throughout the state. On July 29, 2011, after 6 years, the state of Delaware resumed the practice of execution when it killed Robert Jackson. Jackson had no relation to me. Jackson was the 15th man executed in Delaware since 1992. By comparison, Pennsylvania, with a death row of 220, has executed 3 men since 1995. Execution violates human rights, is expensive, incurs a cycle of violence, and is used disproportionately against minorities and the poor. Delaware's rate of death sentences for black offenders with white victims is usually high. It was 75% higher than the next highest states, Georgia and Nevada, more than twice as high as that of South Carolina or Virginia, and more than 3 times as high as that of our nearest neighbors, Maryland and in Pennsylvania. We certainly cannot say that we live in a country that offers equal justice to all Americans when racial disparities plague the system by which our society imposes the ultimate punishment. Delaware must face the fact that the state's so-called criminal justice system is severely and chronically flawed. The case of Jermaine Wright illustrates a failure of justice dating back over 20 years. Prosecutors and police violated the Constitution and ignored evidence in order to close a case and get a win. Mr. Wright's life has been spared, not because of the system, but in spite of the system. We should be profoundly thankful to the judge and justices who decided to overturn this conviction because of repeated errors and without evidence. They have kept us from executing an innocent man. Unfortunately, the death penalty system is not Delaware's only problem. Evidence stolen and replaced in the medical examiner's office has undermined the brutality of hundreds of drug convictions. The severe underfunding of the public defender's office has led to thousands of poor Delawareans represented by legal counsel who are spread too thin when facing serious prosecution or not represented at all, in direct violation of constitutional rights. We need to repeal the death penalty in Delaware immediately. We have too many other criminal justice challenges to confront and remedy. We should not be wasting further time, talent, and money on continued use of the death penalty in Delaware. Do we as a people have a right to kill people? I don't think the state-sponsored killing, the most premeditated of murders, solves anything. In fact, it makes us all hypocrites when we tell our kids to stop killing each other and then turn around as adults in a civilized society and kill someone. We shouldn't accept violence no matter what side the fence is on. It's really about what kind of society that we want to live in and the kind of society that we want to leave our children, and I think we can do better than the state sponsors death. On June 15th, the Delaware State Supreme Court heard arguments on the constitutionality of the death penalty. The Sixth Amendment to the United States Constitution requires a jury, not a judge, to find facts necessary to impose the death penalty. But for the last 25 years, Delaware, along with Florida and Alabama, has violated this constitutional principle. We cannot afford to make any more mistakes when dealing with the severity of a death sentence. I hope and pray that this is the moment, that this is the time that our Supreme Court will bring this unconstitutional practice to an end. We don't have to put people to death. There are alternatives, and the last thing we want to do is execute an innocent person. We are standing here today in front of the United States Supreme Court in Washington, D.C., the highest court in the land, and the greatest country in the world. Great because we are a people of change. We recognize our mistakes and we correct them, and as a result, we grow stronger as a nation. We can do the right thing. NAACP Delaware State Conference is calling on the Delaware Supreme Court and Governor Jack Markell to do the right thing and end Delaware's flawed death penalty system immediately. Thank you very much.